From a complete cast replacement to impossible age math that nobody addressed, the 1977 Bewitched spin-off Tabitha conjured up enough behind-the-scenes chaos to make even a witch's head spin. This ill-fated series featured royalty checks for a child who never appeared, a character who switched from warlock to mortal between pilots, and a mysterious name change that still confuses fans today, all while hiding secrets that make it one of television's most bizarre production stories. Fact 1. 2 completely different pilots, 2 different Tabithas. Most TV shows film one pilot episode and hope it gets picked up, but Tabitha went through an unusually chaotic process with 2 completely different versions before it ever made it to air. The first pilot was filmed in 1976 and starred an actress named Liberty Williams in the lead role, playing a grown-up version of the little witch daughter from Bewitched. In this original version, Tabitha wasn't even a blonde like her mother Samantha had been. She was a brunette, which immediately felt wrong to longtime fans of the original series. The whole setting was different too, with Tabitha working as an editorial assistant for a fictional magazine called Trend in San Francisco, living a completely different life than what viewers would eventually see. She had a boyfriend named Cliff who worked as a commercial artist, and the dynamic between the characters was totally different from what the show would become. But when ABC executives watched this first pilot, they clearly weren't impressed with what they saw. Instead of just tweaking a few things or replacing 1 or 2 actors like networks sometimes do, ABC made the dramatic decision to scrap absolutely everything and start from scratch. They brought in a whole new cast with Lisa Hartman taking over the title role, moved the entire show from San Francisco down to Los Angeles, and completely reimagined what Tabitha's adult life would look like, changing her job, her workplace, and essentially every single element of the show except for the basic premise of a grown-up witch trying to make it in the modern world. Fact 2. Adam went from warlock to mortal overnight. When ABC decided to retool the show after the first pilot failed, they didn't just change the cast and location, they completely flipped one of the main characters in a way that fundamentally altered the entire dynamic of the series. In the original 1976 pilot, Tabitha's brother Adam was portrayed as a full-fledged warlock with magical powers just like his sister, and his whole personality was built around being mischievous and fun-loving, constantly encouraging Tabitha to stop living like a boring mortal and embrace her magical heritage. He wanted her to use her powers freely and enjoy the supernatural side of their family, essentially playing the role of the troublemaker who thought living in the mortal world was a waste of perfectly good witchcraft. But when the completely reworked for the second pilot and the actual series, the producers made a bizarre decision to strip Adam of his powers entirely and turn him into a regular mortal human being, just like their father Darren had been on the original Bewitched. This wasn't just a small character adjustment, it was a total 180 that reversed everything about who Adam was supposed to be. Suddenly, Adam became the disapproving voice of reason who constantly scolded Tabitha whenever she used her magic, always worried about her getting caught or exposed, and spent his time trying to convince her to live a normal, non-magical life. The change was clearly meant to recreate the same tension that existed between Darren and Samantha on Bewitched, with Adam filling his father's role as the mortal who just wanted a normal existence while living with someone who had supernatural abilities. Fact 3. The impossible age timeline nobody addressed. One of the strangest things about Tabitha is that the show expected viewers to completely ignore basic mathematics when it came to the main character's age. On the original Bewitched series, Tabitha was born in an episode that aired in 1966, which means that when Tabitha premiered in 1977, she would have been only 11 years old, probably somewhere in middle school learning algebra and dealing with regular kid problems. But the new show portrayed her as a fully grown 22-year-old woman who had already graduated from college and was working as a production assistant at a television station, living independently in Los Angeles and navigating adult relationships and career challenges. The math simply didn't work, and what made it even more awkward was that the show's opening credits included actual footage and photographs of baby Tabitha from the original Bewitched series, showing her as a toddler with the twin actresses Erin and Diane Murphy, who had played her back then. So viewers were literally watching clips of the character as a small child in the intro. and then immediately seeing her as a grown adult in her 20s, with only 5 years having passed in real time since Bewitched went off the air in 1972. The show made absolutely no attempt to explain this impossible timeline, never addressed why Tabitha had somehow aged 11 extra years in just 5 real-world years, and apparently hoped that audiences would either not notice or just accept it as one of those things you had to overlook for the sake of entertainment. Fact 4. Susan Dey turned down the lead role. Before Lisa Hartman ever stepped into the role of the adult Tabitha, the producers had their sights set on a different actress who they thought would be absolutely perfect for the part. Susan Dey, who had just finished playing Laurie Partridge on The Partridge Family from 1970 to 1974, was actually offered the lead role in Tabitha somewhere between the 2 pilots being filmed. The idea seemed to make a lot of sense on paper, since Dey had plenty of experience playing the wholesome daughter character on a popular family sitcom, and she had the right look that the producers were going for. In fact, Bewitched writer Ed Jurist was so enthusiastic about the potential casting that he specifically commented on how perfect she would be, calling her an exact double for Elizabeth Montgomery, the actress who had played Samantha on the original series. But despite how ideal the casting seemed from the producer's perspective, Susan Dey turned down the offer without much hesitation. The reason had everything to do with where she was in her career at that moment, because after spending 4 years being known as the sweet, innocent Laurie Partridge, Dey was actively trying to break away from being typecast in those kinds of wholesome daughter roles. She wanted to be taken seriously as an adult actress and pursue more dramatic and challenging parts, which she eventually succeeded in doing when she landed the role of Grace Van Owen on L.A. Law years later and won a Golden Globe for her performance. Fact 5. Robert Urich holds the record for most TV series. Robert Urich played Paul Thurston, the egotistical talk show host who served as Tabitha's love interest on the series, and while Tabitha itself didn't last very long, Urich's appearance on the show was just one small part of what would become the most remarkable television career in terms of sheer volume of series regular roles. At the time Tabitha was filming in 1977, Urich was still relatively early in his career, having previously appeared in shows like SWAT and Bob and Carol and Ted and Alice. But he was already building a reputation as someone who could carry a television series. What's truly astonishing is that 1977 alone saw him appearing as a regular cast member in 3 different shows, including Tabitha, the sitcom soap where he played a tennis pro, and eventually moving on to other projects that same year. Over the course of his 30-year career, Robert Urich would go on to star as a series regular in a total of 13 different television shows, which stands as a record that no other actor in television history has ever matched. His most famous roles came later with Vegas, where he played private detective Dan Tana and earned 2 Golden Globe nominations, and Spencer for Hire, where he portrayed the title character for 3 seasons. The fact that he holds this record is even more impressive when you consider that many successful actors might star in 2 or 3 series over their entire careers, making Urich's 13 series an extraordinary achievement that speaks to both his versatility and his enduring appeal to network executives and audiences alike. Fact 6. Erin Murphy got royalties without appearing. One of the more unusual financial arrangements in television history happened with Erin Murphy, who, along with her twin sister, Diane, had played the young Tabitha on the original Bewitched series throughout most of its run. By the time Tabitha went into production in 1977, Erin Murphy was only 13 years old, which obviously made her far too young to play a 20-something professional woman living and working in Los Angeles, so she had no involvement whatsoever in the actual filming or production of the spin-off series. However, the producers of Tabitha made the decision to include footage and photographs from the original Bewitched show in the opening credits sequence, showing clips of Tabitha as a little girl to establish the connection between the new series and its predecessor and remind viewers of where this character came from. Because those images featured Erin Murphy's actual likeness from when she was a child actress on Bewitched, she was legally entitled to compensation for the use of her image, which meant that she started receiving royalty checks from Tabitha even though she never set foot on the set or had anything to do with the production. This arrangement turned out to be particularly interesting because it meant Murphy continued getting paid for work she had done years earlier as a child. And according to reports, she was still receiving these small royalty payments for quite some time, since the show continued to air in reruns and was eventually released on DVD, meaning her childhood performance kept generating income well into her adult life. Fact 7. Adam and Tabitha's birth order was reversed. The producers of Tabitha didn't just mess up the timeline when it came to the characters' ages, they also completely flipped the birth order of the two siblings in a way that anyone who had watched the original Bewitched would immediately notice. On Bewitched, the show made it crystal clear that Tabitha was the firstborn child, arriving in an episode that aired in 1966 during the show's second season, and her little brother Adam didn't come along until 3 years later in 1969 during the show's sixth season. This meant that Tabitha was unquestionably the older sibling by a significant margin, having been an only child for the first several years of her life before her baby brother was born. But when Tabitha premiered in 1977, the show inexplicably reversed this established fact and made Adam the older brother instead, with the characters even specifically referring to Tabitha as his kid sister in dialogue throughout the series. Adam talks to Tabitha in a way that suggests he's the protective older sibling looking out for his younger sister, and the whole dynamic between them is built on the assumption that he's older and more responsible, while she's the younger one figuring things out. The show offered absolutely no explanation for why this fundamental aspect of their family history had suddenly changed, never addressed the contradiction, and apparently just hoped that viewers either wouldn't remember the original birth order or wouldn't care enough to make an issue out of it. Fact 8. The mysterious spelling change from Tabitha. The spelling of the main character's name went through a confusing journey that started back on the original Bewitched and somehow got even messier when the spin-off series came around years later. When Tabitha was first born on Bewitched in 1966, the production credits and promotional materials spelled her name as Tabitha with an A in the middle instead of an I, which was actually a mistake that happened early on and stuck around for the first few seasons of the show. Elizabeth Montgomery, who played Samantha and had suggested the name Tabitha for her television daughter in the first place, reportedly really disliked this misspelling and felt strongly that it should be corrected to the proper biblical spelling of Tabitha with an I. Eventually, the show did fix the error and switched to spelling it correctly as Tabitha, which is how it remained for the later seasons of Bewitched and how most fans came to know the character. But then, something strange happened when the spin-off was being developed in the mid-70s. Because the first rejected pilot that aired in 1976 actually went back to using the old incorrect spelling of Tabitha with an A, even though that mistake had been corrected years earlier on the parent show. Nobody really knows why the producers decided to resurrect the misspelling that Elizabeth Montgomery had disliked so much, but thankfully, when ABC retooled everything and produced the second pilot and the actual series, they finally settled on the correct spelling of Tabitha with an I and kept it that way throughout the show's brief run. Fact 9. Dr. Bombay's first name finally revealed. Dr. Bombay was one of the most beloved recurring characters on the original Bewitched series, playing the role of the witch doctor, who would appear in outrageous costumes whenever Samantha or her family needed medical help with supernatural ailments, always arriving with his distinctive laugh and quirky sense of humor. The character, played by British actor Bernard Fox, showed up in more than a dozen episodes throughout Bewitched's 8-year run from 1964 to 1972, becoming a fan favorite despite the fact that viewers never learned what his actual first name was during all those years. He was only ever referred to as Dr. Bombay, and the show never felt the need to reveal any more personal details about him beyond his role as the family's trusted physician for magical problems. But when Tabitha brought back several characters from the original series for guest appearances, Bernard Fox reprised his role as Dr. Bombay in 2 episodes, including the very last episode of the series titled Tabitha's Party, which aired in January of 1978. It was in this final episode that the show finally answered a question that had gone unanswered. For over a decade, casually revealing that Dr. Bombay's first name was Hubert. giving fans their first and only glimpse into this small piece of personal information about a character they had been watching since the mid-60s. The revelation came so late that most viewers probably didn't even realize they had been waiting all those years to learn it. Fact 10. Friday Night Death Slot sealed the show's fate. When Tabitha first premiered in September of 1977, ABC scheduled it for Saturday nights at 8 p.m., and the show actually started off with fairly decent ratings that suggested it might have a chance at survival despite all the problems with continuity and the mixed reception from critics. The Saturday night time slot put it up against some tough competition, including the final seasons of The Bob Newhart Show on CBS and The Bionic Woman on NBC. But the show was holding its own and maintaining an audience that seemed interested enough to keep tuning in week after week. However, in January of 1978, ABC made a decision that television insiders refer to as the kiss of death for any series, moving Tabitha from its Saturday night spot to Friday nights at 8 p.m., which has long been known in the industry as the Friday Night Death Slot. This time slot has earned its grim reputation because Friday nights are when most people are out socializing, going to movies, or doing other activities instead of sitting at home watching television, which means that shows placed there typically see their ratings drop dramatically no matter how good they might be. The move had exactly the devastating effect that everyone might have predicted, with Tabitha's ratings absolutely plummeting after the schedule change. By the time the season ended, the show had fallen all the way down to 81st place out of 104 programs, earning a Nielsen rating of just 14.8 and becoming ABC's second lowest rated program on their entire schedule, which made cancellation pretty much inevitable. Fact 11. Only 11 of 12 episodes ever aired. The production team behind Tabitha actually managed to film a total of 12 episodes for what they hoped would be the show's first season, which doesn't sound like much compared to the typical 22 or 24 episode orders that successful shows received back in the 1970s, but at least represented a decent starting point for a new series trying to find its audience. However, ABC's faith in the show was apparently so low that they didn't even bother airing all of the episodes that had been produced, choosing instead to pull the plug after broadcasting only 11 of the 12 completed episodes during the show's brief run from September of 1977 to January of 1978. This meant that one full episode sat on a shelf somewhere, fully filmed and edited and ready to go, but never making it to television screens during the show's original run because the network decided it wasn't worth the airtime. When you add in the fact that there were also 2 different pilot episodes that had been filmed before the series even started, with the first pilot being completely scrapped and the second one airing as the official premiere, the whole production becomes a story of wasted effort and resources. The decision to air only 11 episodes makes Tabitha one of the shortest-lived spin-offs in television history, lasting barely 4 months on the air before ABC decided to cut their losses and move on to something else. Fact 12. The show celebrated a 25-year wedding anniversary that never happened. The writers of Tabitha seemed to have a serious problem with basic math throughout the entire series, and nowhere was this more obvious than in the show's final episode titled Tabitha's Party, which aired in January of 1978. In this episode, the plot revolves around celebrating Samantha and Darren's 25th wedding anniversary, treating it as a major milestone that the Witches' Council is so impressed by that they decide to use it as justification for encouraging more marriages between witches and mortals. The whole storyline depends on this being their 25th anniversary, and what a remarkable achievement it represents that their mixed marriage has lasted that long despite all the challenges they faced. But anyone who had watched the original Bewitched knew that Samantha and Darren got married in the very first episode of that series, which premiered in 1964, meaning that when this Tabitha episode aired in January of 1978, they would have only been married for 14 years at most. The writers were apparently so committed to making Tabitha and Adam adults in their 20s that they just added 11 extra years to their parents' marriage to make the timeline work, even though it created this glaring mathematical impossibility that made absolutely no sense. It's yet another example of how the show seemed to operate under the assumption that viewers either wouldn't notice these continuity errors or wouldn't care enough to point them out. Fact 13. Christmas specials kept preempting the show. Even though Tabitha had plenty of problems with its writing and continuity issues, one of the biggest factors that hurt its chances of success had nothing to do with the show itself, and everything to do with ABC's scheduling decisions during the crucial early weeks of its run. The series premiered on September 10, 1977, airing what was technically the second episode since the pilot had already been shown during the summer. And then the network immediately started preempting it from its Saturday night time slot to make room for beloved holiday specials like Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer and Frosty the Snowman that aired every year during the fall and winter months. These preemptions meant that new episodes of Tabitha simply weren't showing up when viewers expected them to, creating a confusing and inconsistent schedule that made it nearly impossible for the show to build any kind of regular audience or maintain whatever momentum it might have generated from its premiere. The situation got so bad that the third episode of the series didn't air until November 12th, which was more than 2 full months after the September 10th premiere, leaving viewers wondering whether the show had been canceled or was just taking an unusually long break. For a brand new series that desperately needed to establish itself and give audiences a reason to keep coming back week after week, these constant interruptions were absolutely devastating. And even Lisa Hartman herself commented years later that the show might have had a better chance at survival if it hadn't been bumped so frequently for Christmas programming. Fact 14. Lisa Hartman sang the theme song. Herself, Lisa Hartman brought more than just her acting abilities to Tabitha because she was also an aspiring singer who had already started building a music career before she ever landed the lead role in the series. In 1976, just a year before Tabitha premiered, Hartman had released her first self-titled solo album on Kirshner Records, showing that she had serious ambitions beyond just acting and wanted to establish herself as a recording artist as well. When it came time to produce the theme song for Tabitha, the producers made the somewhat unusual decision to have their star perform it herself, rather than hiring a separate artist or using an instrumental theme like many sitcoms did during that era. The song was called It Could Be Magic, which was a fitting title for a show about a young witch trying to balance her magical abilities with living a normal life in the mortal world. Having the lead actress sing the theme song was actually quite rare in television, especially for sitcoms, making Hartman part of a very small group of performers who could say they both starred in their own series and provided the vocals for its opening music. This dual role showcased her versatility as an entertainer and gave the show a unique personal touch, even if it couldn't save Tabitha from its other problems. Hartman would go on to release several more albums throughout the 1980s and eventually achieved her biggest musical success with a duet called When I Said I Do that she recorded with her husband, country singer Clint Black, which reached #1 on the country charts in 1999. Fact 15. Bewitched cast reunions created the best episodes. Despite all of Tabitha's problems with continuity errors, poor ratings, and scheduling issues, there's a general consensus among fans and critics that the show did manage to produce a handful of episodes that were actually worth watching, and those episodes all had one thing in common. They featured actors from the original Bewitched series reprising their beloved roles from that show. Bernard Fox returned as Dr. Bombay in 2 episodes, bringing back his distinctive laugh and outrageous costumes that had made him such a fan favorite on Bewitched, while Sandra Gould and George Tobias came back to play the nosy neighbors Gladys and Abner Kravitz in an episode titled The Arrival of Nancy, which was actually directed by William Asher, the producer and director who had been instrumental in making the original Bewitched such a success. These reunion episodes gave longtime fans a chance to see characters they had loved for years interacting with the grown-up version of little Tabitha, creating a sense of nostalgia and connection to the original series that the show otherwise completely lacked. The series also benefited from guest appearances by talented character actors like Werner Klemperer, who was famous for playing Colonel Klink on Hogan's Heroes, Fred Willard, who would go on to become a comedy legend, and Mary Wickes, a veteran performer who brought genuine charm and professionalism to her role. These guest stars and returning Bewitched cast members provided the only real entertainment value that Tabitha ever managed to offer, making those particular episodes stand out as the sole bright spots in an otherwise forgettable and poorly executed spin-off.